Title I-A funds are currently allocated through four grant formulas that are based primarily on census poverty estimates and the cost of education in each state. These grants are a base grant, concentration grant, targeted grant, and Education Finance Incentive Grant, or EFIG. Base grants provide funds to LEAs that have at least 10 formula children and where more than 2% of students in the district are experiencing poverty. Formula children are students ages 5 through 17 whose families are navigating poverty as determined by the Census Poverty Collection. Concentration grants provide funds to LEAs that have more than 6,500 children or where 15% or more of students in the district are experiencing poverty. Targeted grants add additional funds to LEAs whose poverty percentage is more than 5%. And Education Finance Incentive Grants provide additional funding to LEAs through a weighted formula, in part based on the state's effort to provide education funding. LEAs must have a poverty percentage over 5% to qualify for this funding. Each LEA receives a total amount based on the number of students that qualify for each grant. Once the amount is calculated and allocated to qualifying LEAs, each LEA then must follow a set of required and allowable allocations. Two main factors determine the amount of Title I funds that an LEA has available to allocate to schools. The first is the size of the LEA's Title I allocation. The second factor, which is discussed in this section, is the amount of funds reserved for required and optional program activities, or what is commonly referred to as set-asides. The required set-asides are for the following program activities: services for children and youth navigating housing instability, family engagement, equitable services for eligible private school students, and services for students without parental supervision. LEAs are required to set aside funds to provide services to support the needs of children and youth navigating housing instability. It is the responsibility of the Title I coordinator to work with the McKinney-Vento liaison to determine each child's needs through the needs assessment process, working together each year. They consider the following: how many students experiencing housing instability were enrolled in the district last year? How many attend non-Title I schools? And what are the greatest unmet educational needs? These funds can be used for things like funding a portion of the McKinney-Vento liaison, professional learning specific to learning requirements of the McKinney-Vento Act, transportation to and from school and school activities, and other activities to enable students experiencing housing instability to fully participate in their educational experience. Please note that LEAs are required to have a McKinney-Vento liaison. Even if your district or school does not have any students that currently qualify for these services, you are still required to set aside funds in case something unfortunate happens during the school year. For example, there could be a fire, flood, or snowstorm that destroys homes in your area, leaving families homeless. This set-aside helps ensure that children do not experience any disruptions in their education. LEAs are required to set aside funds to provide services to support family engagement activities. This set-aside has specific guidelines for determining the amount to reserve. If you receive more than $500,000 in Title I-A money, you must reserve at least 1%. For example, if my total Title I-A allocation was $10 million, then I need to reserve at least $100,000 for family engagement. After the 1% set-aside amount is determined, the LEA must then allocate at least 90% of that amount to schools for family engagement activities. The remaining 10% may be used for district-wide family engagement activities. However, you may allocate the entire amount to Title I schools and fund any district-wide family engagement activities with other state and local funds. These funds can be used for required activities that promote family engagement and support academic learning at home. Note that all family engagement activities at the district level are only for use in Title I-A funded schools, not all schools in the district. Refreshments. Funds set aside for family engagement may be used to pay for light refreshments to facilitate the attendance of family members during engagement activities. For more information about refreshments, see the ESSA Quick Reference Brief, Purchasing Food with Federal Funds, in the Resources section of this module. LEAs are required to set aside funds to provide services to eligible students that attend private schools, known as equitable services. Each year, your LEA is required to consult with all in-district eligible private schools and any out-of-district private schools that enroll eligible students residing in their district. First, LEAs must invite private schools to participate in equitable services every spring. If the private school decides to participate, then the LEA must begin consultation with participating private schools. Once consultation begins, the district provides services to eligible private school participants based on the specific needs of the participating private school students. Services can include direct instruction to eligible students, professional development to eligible teachers, and/or parent and family engagement. There is a very specific process a district must follow for consultation to meet the equitable services requirement. Note that this set-aside is only required for districts with private schools that choose to receive equitable services under Title I-A. The amount reserved for equitable services is determined by multiple factors, which is covered in the Equitable Services module. If you have children within your district boundaries attending a local, meaning not state-run, residential facility for students without parental supervision, you are required to set aside Title I-A funds to provide services to children in those facilities. The set-aside is specifically for districts with facilities qualifying as neglected by federal law. Only districts who report neglected facilities during the Title I-D October caseload count are required to complete this set-aside. These children include those living in residential facilities, local institutions, or in community day school programs. These funds can be used to provide services that are comparable to those provided to other children in the district. The amount reserved depends on the services needed for children living in eligible facilities and is typically a per-pupil amount. For example, a district has 34 children that live in a residential facility. During your needs assessment process, your leadership team determined that the services they needed to support their educational experiences was estimated to be $2,000 per child. So, the set-aside is $68,000 a year. Once all of the required set-asides have been reserved, the LEA can decide among an array of optional activities to implement district-wide in order to better serve schools and students. Program administration. Districts may set aside an amount to cover costs associated with the overall administration for operating the Title I-A program. These costs may include staffing to carry out the administration of the Title I-A required and optional services offered in your district. Early learning activities. Districts may provide early learning activities in schools implementing a Title I-A program for children from birth to age 5, including full-day kindergarten and preschool. Expanded learning time. This set-aside can be used for summer school and/or before and after-school programs for students who attend Title I-A schools. Transportation. You can choose to provide transportation for students in comprehensive support and improvement schools if the district offers these students the option to transfer to another school. Foster care services. You can set aside funds to assist with the provision of services for students in foster care, which may include additional costs to transport children to their schools of origin. Salary equalization. This takes into account school-by-school variations in personnel costs, such as seniority pay differentials or fringe benefit differentials. It is intended to address situations where similar per-child amounts would result in different levels of service because the salary and benefit costs of the Title I-A staff at one school are higher than the equivalent staff at another Title I-A school. Professional development. You can set aside funds to provide professional learning to educators in Title I-A schools. In schools implementing a school-wide program, this includes all instructors and staff in the school. In schools implementing a targeted assistance program, this includes instructors and staff working with the students who have been identified for targeted support. Now, please return to the module for the next learning activity.